The gunshot echoed across the plains, startling Madeline Vance from her fitful sleep. She bolted upright, her heart pounding against her ribs as she strained to listen through the darkness of her modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Fort Stockton, Texas. Another shot rang out, closer this time, followed by the sound of breaking glass downstairs. This wasn't the first time trouble had found her door in the 2 years since her husband's death, but never had it come in the dead of night with her children asleep under the same roof. It was 1876, and the West was still wild despite the progression of civilization. The railroad had brought prosperity to some parts of Texas, but it had also brought opportunists and outlaws looking to stake their claim on the riches of others. As a widow with a small ranch and 2 young children, Madeline had become an easy target. She reached for the rifle she kept propped beside her bed, a Winchester her husband Thomas had taught her to shoot before typhoid fever took him. Her fingers curled around the smooth wood as she heard the unmistakable sound of boots on her wooden floor. "Mama," her 8-year-old daughter Hannah whispered from the doorway, clutching her younger brother Caleb's hand. The 6-year-old boy's eyes were wide with fear. "Hush now," Madeline whispered, motioning them to her. "Come here and stay quiet." The children scurried to her side as heavy footsteps ascended the stairs. Madeline positioned herself between the door and her children, rifle raised. "Check upstairs for valuables," a gruff voice commanded from below. "And anyone who might give us trouble." Madeline's hands trembled. She was a decent shot at stationary targets in daylight, but in the darkness against moving men who meant harm. She swallowed hard, knowing her children's lives depended on her courage. The floorboard outside her bedroom creaked. The door handle turned slowly. Then, unexpectedly, a commotion erupted downstairs. Shouts and the sound of breaking furniture filled the night air, followed by more gunshots. "What the hell?" the man outside her door growled, his footsteps retreating hastily down the stairs. Madeline held her position, keeping her children behind her as the sounds of a struggle continued. Minutes that felt like hours passed before silence fell over the house. "Mrs. Vance." A deep, unfamiliar voice called from downstairs. "Madam, are you and your children all right up there?" Madeline didn't respond immediately, wary of a trick. "The men who broke in are gone now," the voice continued. "I don't mean you any harm. I'm coming up slow so you can see me." Heavy footsteps ascended the stairs again, but these were measured, deliberate. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes that held a quiet intensity. "Name's Yates Westbrook, madam," he said, keeping his distance. "I was passing by when I saw the lights of those men circling your property. Didn't seem right." Madeline lowered her rifle slightly, studying the stranger. His clothes were trail-worn, his hat dusty, but there was something reassuring about his calm demeanor. "How do I know you're not with them?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "If I was, I wouldn't have run them off," he answered simply. "They're headed east, but they might circle back. You and your young ones should gather what you need. I can escort you to town if you'd like." Hannah peeked around her mother. "Did you shoot the bad men, mister?" Yates shook his head. "No, little lady, just convince them your home wasn't worth the trouble." He glanced at Madeline. "They'll be back, though. Men like that don't take kindly to interference." Madeline knew he was right. She'd been fighting to keep her ranch since Thomas died, and the local cattle baron, Victor Hollister, had been pressuring her to sell. These night visitors were likely his way of increasing that pressure. "We'll leave at first light," she decided, "but we're not going to town. We're going to stay and defend what's ours." Yates studied her for a moment, respect flickering in his eyes. "That's your choice to make, Mrs. Vance." But those men had the look of Fletcher's gang. They've been terrorizing ranches from here to El Paso. Fletcher? Madeline's blood ran cold. Even in Fort Stockton, they'd heard of Fletcher's outlaws, known for their brutality and lack of mercy. "Yes, madam." "And if they're working for someone who wants your land, they'll be back with more men." Caleb tugged at his mother's nightgown. "I'm scared, Mama." Madeline pulled her son close, making a decision that went against every independent bone in her body. "Mr. Westbrook, if you're willing, we could use your help, at least until we can make other arrangements." Yates nodded, his expression giving nothing away. "I'll keep watch downstairs. You folks try to get some rest." As he turned to leave, Madeline asked, "Why did you stop to help us?" "You don't know us." Yates paused, his broad shoulders framed in the doorway. "Some things a man just does because they need doing, Mrs. Vance. No other reason necessary." With that, he descended the stairs, leaving Madeline to wonder about the mysterious cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere to save her family. Dawn broke over the Texas plains, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. Madeline had managed only a few fitful hours of sleep, her mind racing with plans and fears. She dressed quickly in a simple blouse and skirt, pinning her chestnut hair back before checking on her children. Hannah and Caleb were still asleep, exhausted from the night's terror. Downstairs, she found Yates Westbrook seated by the window, his eyes scanning the horizon. His rifle rested across his knees and a cup of coffee steamed on the table beside him. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the coffee pot on the stove. "Took the liberty of brewing some." "Not at all," Madeline replied, pouring herself a cup. "Thank you for staying." Yates nodded. "Your land is good. I can see why someone would want it." "It was my husband's dream," she said, gazing out at the fields they had worked together. "We came from Virginia right after the war. Thomas said Texas was a place where a man could build something that would last. He was right about that." Yates sipped his coffee. "Though it's not easy for a woman alone." Madeline straightened her spine. "I'm not alone. I have my children and I have neighbors who help when they can." She hesitated. "Though many have sold to Hollister in recent months." "Hollister, the name's come up in conversations across 3 counties," Yates remarked. "Ambitious man." "Ruthless is the word I'd use," Madeline countered. "He wants to control all the water rights in the county." "My land has the creek that feeds half the neighboring farms." Yates nodded thoughtfully. "That explains the urgency of his interest." The sound of small feet on the stairs announced the arrival of Hannah and Caleb. The children regarded Yates with curious eyes, their fear from the night before replaced by the resilient wonder of youth. "Are you a real cowboy?" Caleb asked, his eyes wide as he took in Yates's weathered appearance. A ghost of a smile touched Yates's lips. "I've been called worse things." "Do you have a horse?" Hannah inquired, showing more boldness than her brother. "I do. Name's Duster. He's out back in your corral if your mother doesn't mind." Madeline nodded her permission, and the children raced to the window to catch a glimpse of the cowboy's horse. "Mr. Westbrook," Madeline began, "I appreciate your help last night, but I can't ask you to stay and risk your life for us. Hollister's men will return, possibly with Fletcher's gang." Yates set down his coffee cup. "Mrs. Vance, I'm between jobs at the moment. Was heading to Fort Stockton to find work when I came across your situation." He glanced at the children by the window. "I've got no family waiting on me, no pressing engagements. If you'll have me, I'd like to help you secure your property." Madeline studied him, trying to discern his motives. In her experience, men didn't offer help without expecting something in return, but there was a steadiness to Yates Westbrook that made her want to trust him. "We can't pay much," she warned. "Room and board will do for now," he replied. "And maybe you can put in a good word for me in town when this is settled." After a moment's consideration, Madeline nodded. "All right, Mr. Westbrook, you have a deal." The children cheered, already warming to the idea of a protector in their midst. "First order of business," Yates said, standing, "is to make this place less inviting to uninvited guests." For the next several days, Yates worked from dawn till dusk, reinforcing the doors and windows, setting up defensive positions around the property, and teaching Madeline to shoot with greater accuracy. The children shadowed him constantly, pestering him with questions about his travels and adventures. Yates was patient with them, answering what he could while keeping the harsher realities of his life to himself. He didn't tell them about the war that had taken his youth or the years of drifting that followed. He didn't mention the nightmares that still woke him in a cold sweat or the emptiness that had driven him across the frontier for over a decade. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Madeline found him mending a fence that had fallen into disrepair. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. "You didn't have to do that," she said, offering him a glass of water. Yates accepted it with a nod of thanks. "Idle hands make for troubled thoughts, Mrs. Vance. Please call me Madeline," she said. "After all you've done for us, formality seems unnecessary." He met her gaze, something unreadable passing through his eyes. "Madeline, then." They stood in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "The children are quite taken with you," Madeline observed. "Especially Caleb. He's never had a man to look up to since Thomas passed." "They're good kids," Yates replied. "Smart, too." "Hannah's got a head for numbers that would put most bankers to shame." Madeline smiled. "She gets that from her father. He always said she'd run the ranch one day." Her smile faded. "If there's still a ranch for her to run." "There will be," Yates assured her. "Hollister isn't the first land grabber I've encountered. Men like him rely on fear more than force. Once they realize you won't scare easily, they often look for easier targets." "Is that why you've stayed to help us? Because you've faced men like Hollister before?" Yates hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've spent most of my life moving from one place to the next, never staying long enough to put down roots. When I saw your light that night, something told me to ride toward it instead of away." He shrugged. "Can't rightly explain it beyond that." Madeline studied him, sensing there was more to his story than he was sharing. "Well, whatever your reasons, we're grateful. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Before Yates could respond, a distant sound caught his attention. He raised a hand for silence, his posture alert. "Riders coming," he said quietly. "Get the children inside." Madeline hurried to where Hannah and Caleb were gathering eggs from the chicken coop, ushering them quickly into the house. Yates followed, collecting his rifle from where it leaned against the porch. "Stay away from the windows," he instructed, positioning himself by the front door where he could see through a small gap in the curtains. 3 riders approached the house, their silhouettes dark against the twilight sky. They stopped a respectful distance from the porch, and the lead rider called out, "Mrs. Vance, it's Sheriff Miller from Fort Stockton. I'd like a word if you don't mind." Yates glanced at Madeline. "You know him," she nodded. "He's been fair to us, though he can't always stand against Hollister's influence." "I'll cover you," Yates said, moving to a position where he could provide protection if needed. Madeline opened the door, stepping onto the porch with measured confidence. "Evening, Sheriff." "What brings you out this way?" Sheriff Miller removed his hat, revealing a head of graying hair. He was a man in his 50s, with the weary eyes of someone who had seen too much conflict. "Evening, Mrs. Vance. Got word there was some trouble out here a few nights back. Wanted to check on you and the young ones." "We're managing," Madeline replied cautiously. The sheriff's gaze shifted to the shadowed doorway where Yates stood. "I see you've got company." "Mr. Westbrook is helping with the ranch," Madeline explained. "We've had some difficulties with trespassers." "So I heard." Sheriff Miller dismounted, handing his reins to one of his deputies. "Mind if I come up and speak with you both?" Madeline gestured her consent, and the sheriff ascended the porch steps. "Mr. Westbrook," he acknowledged with a nod. "Don't believe we've met." "Just passing through," Yates replied, stepping into the light. "Seemed like Mrs. Vance and her children could use an extra hand." The sheriff studied him for a moment. "You wouldn't happen to be the same Westbrook who had that business down in Lerdo last year?" "With the Mendez brothers," a flicker of recognition crossed Yates's face. "That was a misunderstanding. 3 men died. They chose the wrong side of a fight." Yates's voice was level, but there was steel beneath the calm. Madeline looked between the 2 men, sensing a history she wasn't privy to. Sheriff Miller seemed to come to a decision. "Well, what happened in Lerdo isn't my concern, but I should tell you both that Victor Hollister has filed a complaint. Claims his men were attacked while on legitimate business." "His men broke into my home in the middle of the night," Madeline countered, anger rising in her voice. "They were armed and threatening. Mr. Westbrook intervened to protect my family." The sheriff raised a placating hand. "I'm not here to make arrests, Mrs. Vance. Just to get the facts and warn you that Hollister isn't the type to let things go. He's got the ear of Judge Wilson and backing from investors in Austin who want to see this region developed." "Developed," Madeline echoed. You mean stripped of its resources and controlled by men who have never worked the land a day in their lives. I'm just telling you how things stand, Sheriff Miller replied. Hollister claims he has papers showing your husband owed him money, says he's entitled to the property as payment. That's a lie, Madeline said firmly. Thomas never borrowed from Hollister. We have all our financial records in order. The sheriff nodded. I figured as much, but Hollister has ways of making documents appear when it suits him. He glanced at Yates. And having a man with your reputation here might complicate matters. My reputation isn't on trial, Yates replied, and neither is Mrs. Vance's right to defend her property. Sheriff Miller sighed. Look, I'm not unsympathetic. But there's only so much the law can do against men with Hollister's connections. He turned to Madeline. My advice would be to consider his offer. Take the money and start fresh somewhere else. This is our home, Madeline stated firmly. My children were born here. My husband is buried here. I won't be forced out by threats and lies. The sheriff replaced his hat. Then I hope you're prepared for what's coming. Hollister isn't known for taking no for an answer. He nodded to Yates. And you'd best watch your back, Westbrook. There's still a reward for information on the Mendez affair. As the sheriff and his deputies rode away, Madeline turned to Yates, questions in her eyes. The Mendez brothers, she asked quietly. Yates's jaw tightened. It was 3 years ago. They were rustling cattle and killed a family that caught them in the act. I was hired to track them down. He met her gaze steadily. I'm not proud of everything in my past, Madeline, but I've never harmed an innocent. She studied him, weighing his words against the trust that had been growing between them. I believe you, she finally said. But I need to know if having you here puts my children at greater risk. The only danger to your family is Hollister and men like him, Yates assured her. But if you want me to leave, I will. Madeline shook her head. No, we need your help now more than ever. She glanced toward the house where Hannah and Caleb were watching from the window. But no more secrets, Yates. If we're to face this together, I need to know who's standing beside me. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Fair enough, though some stories aren't fit for young ears. Then we'll talk after they're asleep, Madeline decided. For now, let's reassure them that everything is all right. That night, after the children were tucked into bed with promises that they were safe, Madeline and Yates sat at the kitchen table. A lamp cast warm light over them as Yates spoke of his life, filling in the gaps he had left empty before. He had been a young Union soldier in the war, barely 18 when he saw his first battle. After the surrender at Appomattox, he found himself adrift in a country trying to rebuild itself. With no family left in his native Pennsylvania, he had headed west, working as a ranch hand, a trail driver, occasionally as a bounty hunter when times were lean. I've never stayed in one place long, he admitted. Always felt like I was searching for something I couldn't name. And have you found it? Madeline asked. Yates's gaze met hers across the table. I'm beginning to wonder if maybe I have. A flush of warmth colored Madeline's cheeks, and she looked away, surprised by her reaction to his words. It had been 2 years since Thomas died, 2 years of focusing solely on survival and raising her children. She hadn't allowed herself to think of companionship or connection beyond those bonds. What about you? Yates asked. How did a Virginia girl end up on a Texas ranch? Madeline smiled at the memory. Thomas was passing through Richmond after the war. He'd fought for the Confederacy, but he had no bitterness, just a vision for the future. He talked about Texas like it was the promised land. She traced the grain of the wooden table with her finger. We married within 3 months of meeting. My parents thought I was mad to follow him out here, but I never regretted it. He sounds like a good man. He was, she acknowledged. Kind, hardworking, devoted to his family. The typhoid took him so quickly. 1 week he was plowing the south field, the next he was gone. She blinked back unexpected tears. The children were so young. Hannah remembers him, but Caleb, sometimes I worry he'll forget his father entirely. Yates reached across the table, hesitating before covering her hand with his. Children are resilient, and they have you to keep his memory alive. Madeline was acutely aware of the warmth of his touch, the gentle strength in his calloused hand. Yes, she agreed softly, they do. A moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Yates withdrew his hand, clearing his throat. "We should discuss our plans," he said. "Hollister won't wait long to make his next move." Madeline nodded, grateful for the return to practical matters. "The water rights are what he's after. The creek that runs through the eastern part of our property feeds into the river that supplies half the county. Control the water, control the land," Yates mused. "Classic strategy. Has he approached your neighbors with offers?" Most have already sold to him. "The Johnsons to the north are holding out and the Reeves family to the west, but they're facing the same pressure we are." Yates considered this information. "We should ride out tomorrow, speak with them. There's strength in numbers, and Hollister might think twice about taking on multiple families standing together. The Johnsons would be willing, I think. Robert and Thomas were friends, but the Reeves family keeps to themselves. They're wary of outsiders." "Let me worry about convincing them," Yates said. "For now, we should both get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." As Madeline prepared for bed that night, she found herself thinking of Yates's story, of the lonely path he had walked for so many years. She understood loss and hardship, but she had always had her children, a purpose to drive her forward. What had sustained him through all those rootless years? And why, she wondered as sleep finally claimed her, did she feel as though his arrival had shifted something fundamental in her life, opening a door she had thought permanently closed? The next morning dawned clear and bright, the Texas sky a limitless expanse of blue above the rolling landscape. After a hearty breakfast, Yates and Madeline prepared to ride to the neighboring ranches, leaving Hannah in charge of her younger brother with strict instructions to stay inside and bolt the door. "We won't be gone long," Madeline promised, kissing each child on the forehead. "Mr. Westbrook and I are just going to talk to the Johnsons and the Reeves about helping each other." "Can I come?" Caleb asked, his small face serious. "I can help." "Not this time, partner," Yates said, ruffling the boy's hair. "We need a brave man to stay here and watch over your sister and the house." Caleb straightened, puffing out his chest at the responsibility. "I can do that." Hannah, more perceptive than her years might suggest, looked between her mother and Yates with thoughtful eyes. "Be careful, Mama." "And you too, Mr. Westbrook." "Always am, little lady," Yates assured her with a wink. As they rode across the open country toward the Johnson ranch, Madeline found herself stealing glances at her companion. In the morning light, the hard edges of Yates's face seemed softened, though no less striking. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle, his body moving in perfect harmony with his horse. "The Johnsons have had their share of trouble with Hollister too," Madeline said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Their youngest son, Daniel, was beaten by some of Hollister's men last month when he refused to let them drive cattle across their property." Yates's expression darkened. Men who prey on the young and defenseless deserve whatever comes to them. Robert wanted to fight back, but with 5 children to feed and his wife in poor health, he can't risk open conflict. "Sometimes standing together is the only way to avoid a fight," Yates observed. "Hollister picks off vulnerable ranches one by one because it's easier than facing united resistance." They crested a small rise, and the Johnson homestead came into view below them. It was a modest place, similar to Madeline's own, with a main house, barn, and several outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, and in the yard, children's laundry fluttered on a line. As they approached, Robert Johnson emerged from the barn, a pitchfork in his hand. He was a weathered man in his 40s, with a thick beard and suspicious eyes that softened when he recognized Madeline. "Madeline Vance," he called, setting aside the pitchfork. "Wasn't expecting visitors today." "Good morning, Robert," Madeline replied as they dismounted. "I hope we're not interrupting your work." "Nothing that can't wait." His gaze shifted to Yates. "Don't believe I've had the pleasure." "Yates Westbrook," Yates introduced himself, extending a hand. "I'm helping Mrs. Vance with some ranch matters." Robert shook his hand, his expression guarded. "Word travels fast in these parts. Heard you had some trouble with Hollister's men." "That's partly why we're here," Madeline explained. "May we speak with you and Sarah? It's important." Robert nodded, leading them toward the house. Sarah will be pleased to see you. She doesn't get many visitors these days. Inside, the Johnson home was warm and lived in, with handmade quilts on the furniture and children's drawings pinned to the walls. Sarah Johnson, a thin woman with prematurely graying hair, greeted Madeline with a genuine smile and offered coffee to their guests. Once they were settled at the kitchen table, Madeline explained the situation: Hollister's escalating pressure, the attack on her home, and the sheriff's warning. "We're not surprised," Robert said grimly. "Hollister's been making life difficult for everyone who won't sell. 2 weeks ago, someone cut our fence lines and scattered half our cattle. Took us 3 days to round them up, and we lost 4 calves in the process. And the mercantile in town suddenly won't extend us credit anymore," Sarah added quietly. "They claim we've fallen behind on payments, though Robert keeps meticulous records." "Hollister's influence at work," Yates remarked. "Isolate pressure, then offer salvation in the form of quick cash for your land." Robert nodded. "His latest offer came yesterday, half what the land is worth but enough to relocate. He made it clear it was a limited-time proposition." "That's why we've come," Madeline said, leaning forward earnestly. "What if we stand together, united in our refusal to be bullied off our land?" "Stand together how exactly?" Robert asked skeptically. "Between us, we have what, 10 people? Against Hollister's hired guns and his connections in Austin. Numbers aren't always what decides these things," Yates interjected. "Strategy and determination count for more than raw manpower. Mr. Westbrook has experience with situations like ours," Madeline explained. "He believes that if enough of us refuse to be intimidated, Hollister might reconsider his approach." Sarah and Robert exchanged a look laden with unspoken communication. Finally, Robert sighed. "I won't pretend we haven't thought about taking Hollister's money," he admitted. "With Sarah's health not what it was and the children needing education, but this land is our legacy, our future." "Then help us protect it," Madeline urged. "We're planning to approach the Reeves family next. If they join us too, we'll have a stronger position." "Old man Reeves is as stubborn as they come," Robert warned. "But his daughter-in-law, Rebecca, might listen to reason. Her husband's been gone 3 months on a cattle drive to Kansas." "We'll speak with them," Yates promised. "In the meantime, consider reinforcing your defenses." Hollister might escalate before he backs down. As they prepared to leave, Sarah pulled Madeline aside while the men discussed practical matters of ranch security. "Your Mr. Westbrook seems capable," she observed with a knowing glint in her eye. "He's not my anything," Madeline protested, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. "He's just helping us through a difficult time," Sarah smiled. "I see the way he looks at you when you're not watching, and the way you look at him too, for that matter." She squeezed Madeline's hand. "Thomas would want you to be happy, you know. He wasn't the type to expect eternal mourning." Madeline was saved from responding by Yates calling that they should head to the Reeves ranch before midday heat made travel uncomfortable. As they rode away from the Johnsons, Madeline found herself mulling over Sarah's words. Had she been looking at Yates in some revealing way? And had he truly been watching her when she wasn't aware? "The Johnsons seem like good people," Yates commented, breaking into her thoughts. "They are," she agreed. "They've had more than their share of hardship, but they've never lost their kindness. And they're willing to stand with us against Hollister. That's something," Madeline nodded. "Robert will talk to some of the smaller homesteaders too. If enough of us band together, perhaps we can make Hollister realize that the cost of forcing us out exceeds the benefit." "It's a sound strategy," Yates approved, "though we should be prepared for him to test our resolve before he accepts defeat." The Reeves Ranch was larger than either the Johnson or Vance properties, with substantial herds of cattle grazing on the rolling grasslands. The main house was an impressive 2-story structure, unusual for the region, speaking to the prosperity the family had achieved through hard work and strategic breeding of their livestock. As they approached, they were met by a young woman on horseback, a rifle balanced casually across her saddle. She was in her mid-20s, with sun-browned skin and auburn hair escaping from beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "That's far enough," she called, her voice carrying across the distance between them. "State your business." Madeline raised her hands slightly to show they were empty. Rebecca Reeves. I'm Madeline Vance from the property east of here. This is Yates Westbrook. We'd like to speak with you about a matter concerning all our ranches. Rebecca studied them, her expression guarded. The Vance place, you're the widow with the two young ones. That's right. After a moment's consideration, Rebecca lowered her rifle slightly. You can come to the house, but I warn you, my father-in-law doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests, especially with my husband away. She led them to the imposing house where an elderly man sat on the porch, his craggy face set in permanent lines of displeasure. We've got visitors, Pa, Rebecca announced. The Vance widow and a friend. I've got eyes, girl, the old man grumbled. What do they want? We've come to discuss Victor Hollister and his attempts to seize control of our lands, Yates stated directly, recognizing that a straightforward approach would work best with a man of Reeves's character. The old man's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. Hollister, eh? That snake's been trying to buy us out for 2 years, offered me 3 times what this place is worth last month. And yet you didn't sell, Madeline observed. Reeves' men don't sell what they've built, he declared proudly. My son and I worked this land from nothing. Hollister can take his money and choke on it, Rebecca dismounted, gesturing for them to do the same. Come inside where it's cooler, we can talk there. Inside the house, the wealth of the Reeves family was evident in the quality of the furnishings and the spaciousness of the rooms. Rebecca offered them cool water from a well, which they gratefully accepted after their dusty ride. Hollister's men broke into my home 3 nights ago, Madeline explained once they were settled. If Mr. Westbrook hadn't intervened, I hate to think what might have happened to my children and me. Old man Reeves scowled. Breaking into a widow's home in the dead of night, that's low, even for Hollister. We believe he's growing desperate to secure the water rights that run through our properties, Yates continued. The Johnsons have agreed to stand with us against him. We hoped you might do the same. Stand how, exactly? Rebecca asked pragmatically. We've got 4 ranch hands, and Pa here is handy with a rifle, but we're not an army. We don't need to be, Yates explained. What we need is to demonstrate that intimidation won't work. That we're organized and prepared to defend what's ours through legal means if possible, and other means if necessary. Old man Reeves chuckled, a dry sound like rustling leaves. I like the way you think, young man. Hollister's the type who preys on the weak and isolated. Show him some teeth, he might back off, or he might escalate, Rebecca pointed out. With James away, we're already stretched thin. That's why we need to stand together, Madeline urged. Share resources, information, support each other if trouble comes. The old man and his daughter-in-law exchanged a look. Finally, Rebecca nodded. The Vances have always been good neighbors, she acknowledged, and Hollister's been a thorn in our side too long. We're in. Good, Yates said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Now let's talk specifics. Communication will be key if Hollister makes a move against any of us. By the time they left the Reeves ranch, a plan was taking shape. Regular patrols between the properties, a system of signals in case of trouble, and an agreement to share labor and resources to ensure no single ranch became vulnerable. As they rode back toward the Vance homestead, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon, Madeline felt the first stirrings of hope since Hollister had begun his campaign against her. You really think this will work? She asked Yates, who rode beside her with the easy confidence that seemed so intrinsic to his nature. He considered her question seriously. It gives us a fighting chance. Hollister expects isolated resistance that he can overcome one property at a time. United opposition changes his calculations. And if he decides to make an example of one of us, then he'll find himself facing all of us, Yates replied firmly. Men like Hollister understand force and economics. If we make it costly enough in men, resources, and reputation, he'll eventually look elsewhere for easier profits. Madeline studied his profile against the golden afternoon light. You speak as if you've faced men like him before. I have, he acknowledged. After the war, there were many who saw opportunity in others' misfortune, land speculators, carpetbaggers, opportunists of all stripes. His expression hardened. I've seen what happens when good people stand aside and let such men take what isn't theirs. Is that why you stopped to help us that night? Madeline asked softly. Because you've seen it before. Yates was quiet for a long moment. Partly, he finally admitted. But there was something else too, something about your home, the light in your window. It called to me in a way I can't quite explain. He met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the same inexplicable connection she had felt. In all my years of wandering, I've never been drawn to stay anywhere. Until now. Madeline's heart quickened at his words, at the quiet intensity behind them. Before she could respond, however, the crack of a rifle shot split the air and Yates lurched in his saddle. "Yates!" Madeline cried as he pressed a hand to his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "Ride," he commanded, already drawing his revolver with his good hand. "Get to cover." Another shot kicked up dirt near their horses' hooves, spurring them into action. They galloped toward a cluster of rocks several hundred yards away, bullets whizzing past them as they rode. Behind the shelter of the boulders, Madeline helped Yates dismount. His face was pale beneath his tan, but his eyes were clear and focused. "Let me see," she demanded, helping him remove his coat to examine the wound. The bullet had torn through the flesh of his upper arm, leaving a bloody furrow but thankfully not lodging in the muscle. "It's not bad," he assured her, though his grimace betrayed the pain he felt. "Bleeds a lot but missed anything important." Madeline tore a strip from her petticoat to bind the wound. "Who's shooting at us?" "Hollister's men, I'd guess," Yates replied, peering cautiously around the edge of their cover. "They must have been watching the Reeves place, saw us leave." "What do we do?" "We can't stay here indefinitely, and the children are at home alone." Yates checked his revolver, counting the bullets. "They're between us and your ranch, 3 of them from what I could see." He glanced at her rifle. "How good are you with that?" "Good enough at this distance," she answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "All right, I'll draw their fire. When they focus on me, you take the one on the left. I'll handle the other 2. "That's madness," Madeline protested. "You're already wounded." "It's our best option," Yates insisted. "Hannah and Caleb need you. We can't risk both of us." Before she could argue further, he moved to the edge of their cover. "On my signal, take your shot, then stay down." With that, he darted from behind the rocks, firing rapidly as he moved to a new position. The attackers, startled by his boldness, returned fire wildly. Madeline took careful aim at the gunman positioned on a ridge to their left. As he rose to target Yates, she squeezed the trigger. The man jerked backward, dropping his weapon. Yates, meanwhile, had engaged the other 2 in a fierce exchange of gunfire. Despite his wounded arm, his shots found their mark with deadly precision. One man fell, clutching his chest. The other, seeing his companions down, turned to flee. "Stop right there," Yates shouted, his gun trained on the retreating figure. "Drop your weapon." The man hesitated, then threw down his rifle, raising his hands. "On your knees," Yates commanded, approaching cautiously. Madeline emerged from cover, her own rifle ready as she joined Yates. "Who sent you?" she demanded of the captured gunman. The man, little more than a youth with patchy stubble on his chin, looked between them with frightened eyes. "Mr. Hollister," he admitted, "said to scare you off, make you reconsider his offer." "Shooting at us is more than a scare tactic," Yates growled. "Wasn't supposed to hit you," the young man protested. "Just fire close enough to make you think twice about organizing against the boss." Yates bound the man's hands with a length of rope from his saddlebag. "You're going to carry a message back to Hollister," he said, his voice cold with controlled anger. "Tell him that the next man who raises a weapon against any of the Allied ranches won't live to report back. Tell him his choices are to negotiate fairly or face the consequences of his actions." "He won't like that," the captive mumbled. "That's not my concern," Yates replied. "Now get on your horse and deliver that message, and don't think about coming back with reinforcements. We'll be watching." They released the young gunman, watching as he scrambled onto his horse and rode away, casting nervous glances over his shoulder. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Madeline turned to Yates, concern etched on her face. "Your wound needs proper cleaning and bandaging." "It can wait until we're home," he insisted. "The children will be worried." The word home hung between them, weighted with significance neither was ready to acknowledge. They rode the remaining distance to the Vance ranch in watchful silence, alert for any sign of further ambush. The sun was setting by the time they reached the homestead, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and crimson. Hannah and Caleb burst from the house as soon as they heard the horses, their faces lighting up with relief at the sight of their mother. "You were gone so long," Hannah exclaimed. "We were starting to worry." Then her eyes fell on Yates's blood-stained shirt and makeshift bandage. "You're hurt, it's just a scratch," Yates assured her with a forced smile. "Nothing to fuss about." "Inside, all of you," Madeline directed, helping Yates dismount. "Caleb, fetch water from the well. Hannah, get the medical supplies from the cabinet." In the warm light of the kitchen, Madeline carefully cleaned and properly dressed Yates's wound while the children watched with solemn faces. "Were you in a gunfight?" Caleb asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Something like that," Yates replied, wincing as Madeline applied antiseptic to the raw flesh. "But everything's all right now. Did you shoot the bad men?" The boy persisted. Madeline gave her son a stern look. "Caleb, that's enough questions for now. Mr. Westbrook needs rest." "It's all right," Yates assured her. "He should understand what we're facing." He turned to the boy. "Yes, Caleb, there were men who meant us harm and we had to defend ourselves. But taking a life is never something to celebrate or take lightly. Remember that." The child nodded, sobered by the seriousness in Yates's tone. Once the wound was bandaged and Yates had changed into a clean shirt borrowed from Thomas's old things, Madeline prepared a simple supper. They ate together at the kitchen table, the domesticity of the scene a stark contrast to the violence they had experienced hours earlier. After the meal, when the children were settled in their rooms, Madeline joined Yates on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "Hollister won't take this lying down," Yates said quietly. "Today's encounter was just the beginning." "I know," Madeline acknowledged, "but we've made our stand. There's no going back now." "You could still take his offer," Yates suggested, though his tone made it clear he didn't expect her to agree. "For the children's sake." Madeline shook her head firmly. "This land is their inheritance, their future. I won't let fear drive us from our home." She turned to face him in the moonlight. "And what about you? This isn't your fight. You could ride away, find somewhere less complicated to spend your days." Yates met her gaze steadily. "There was a time when that's exactly what I would have done. Move on, find another temporary place, another temporary purpose." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But something's changed, Madeline. For the first time in more years than I care to count, I've found something worth staying for." The air between them seemed to still, charged with unspoken emotion. Madeline was acutely aware of his proximity, of the way the moonlight cast shadows across his strong features. "Yates," she began, uncertain of what she wanted to say, only knowing that something fundamental had shifted between them. Before she could continue, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. They both tensed, reaching for weapons out of instinct. "It's Robert Johnson," Yates identified as the riders came into view in the moonlight, "and it looks like Rebecca Reeves is with him." They met their allies in the yard, concern evident in their postures. "We heard gunshots this afternoon," Robert explained without preamble. "Came to make sure you were all right. Hollister's men ambushed us on our way back from the Reeves place," Madeline told them. "Yates was wounded, but we managed to fight them off." Rebecca dismounted, her expression grim. "We've had trouble too. Someone set fire to our south pasture. We managed to contain it before it spread to the house, but we lost a good section of grazing land." "Hollister's response to our alliance," Yates surmised. "He's testing our resolve." "Well, he'll find it stronger than he expected," Robert declared. "We've spoken with the Morgans and the Fitzgeralds. They're with us too. Hollister's bullied them for months. That gives us 6 ranches standing together," Madeline calculated. "Nearly 20 able-bodied men between us." "And women," Rebecca added with a determined gleam in her eye. "I can outshoot most men in the county." "We'll need everyone," Yates acknowledged. "Hollister won't give up easily, not with the water rights at stake." They spent the next hour developing plans for mutual defense patrol schedules, signal systems, fallback positions if any property came under serious attack. By the time Robert and Rebecca departed to spread the word to the other Allied ranches, a comprehensive strategy was in place. "Get some rest," Madeline urged Yates as they watched their friends ride away. "Your wound needs time to heal. I'll take first watch," he insisted. "You sleep. I'll wake you in a few hours." Recognizing the stubborn set of his jaw, Madeline didn't argue. "Very well, but promise you'll call me at the first sign of trouble." "I promise," he agreed, though they both knew he would face any threat himself before endangering her. In the days that followed, the alliance of ranchers established a routine of vigilance. Riders patrolled the boundaries between properties, sharing information and resources. The children stayed close to home, their usual freedom curtailed by the looming threat. Hollister, for his part, seemed to be regrouping. There were reports of men gathering at his headquarters, rumors of hired guns arriving from as far away as Kansas and Missouri. The tension in the region was palpable, like the electric charge before a thunderstorm. Yates's wound healed quickly, thanks to Madeline's careful ministrations. The enforced proximity as she changed his bandages each day, her fingers gentle against his skin, only deepened the connection growing between them. One evening, nearly a week after the ambush, Yates found Madeline in the garden behind the house, harvesting vegetables for supper. The setting sun gilded her hair, turning the chestnut strands to burnished copper. "Let me help with that," he offered, kneeling beside her in the soft earth. "Your arm," she began to protest. "Is fine," he finished for her with a smile. "Thanks to your care." They worked side by side in companionable silence, the simple domestic task a welcome respite from the constant vigilance of recent days. "Hannah asked me an interesting question today," Madeline said after a while. "She wanted to know if you were going to be her new papa." Yates's hands stilled among the bean vines. "What did you tell her?" "I said that you were a friend who was helping us through a difficult time." Madeline kept her eyes on her task, not trusting herself to meet his gaze. "She said she thought it would be nice if you stayed forever." Yates was quiet for so long that Madeline finally looked up. His expression was one of such naked longing that it took her breath away. "Would it?" he asked softly. "Be nice, I mean." The directness of his question caught her off guard. "Yates, I know the timing is all wrong," he continued, the words seeming to flow from some deep wellspring of feeling. "With Hollister threatening your land with all the uncertainty, and I've got nothing to offer but myself, and that's a poor bargain for a woman like you." "Don't say that," Madeline interrupted, her voice suddenly fierce. "Don't diminish what you are, what you've done for us." "What I am is a drifter, Madeline, a man who spent his life moving from one place to the next, never putting down roots, never building anything lasting." "Until now," she reminded him, echoing his own words from days before. His expression softened. "Until now," he agreed. "Being here with you and the children, it's awakened something in me I thought long dead, the desire for home, for connection." Madeline reached out, hesitantly touching his cheek. Then perhaps Hannah's question isn't so outlandish after all. The moment hung between them, fragile and precious. Yates covered her hand with his, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. "Madeline," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. The sound of galloping hooves shattered the moment. They both rose swiftly, instinct and recent experience driving them to alertness. A rider approached at breakneck speed, his horse lathered with sweat from the hard run. It was Daniel Johnson, Robert's eldest son, his face pale with urgency. "Hollister's men," he gasped as he reined in his mount. "They've taken Pa and the Reeves girl, left a message saying if the rest of you don't agree to sell by tomorrow noon, they'll hang them both as rustlers." The blood drained from Madeline's face. "Dear God, where are they being held?" "Hollister's main ranch," Daniel replied. "They've got at least 15 men guarding the place. Ma sent me to warn you they'll be coming for the rest of the alliance leaders next." Yates's expression hardened into grim determination. "They won't get the chance. Go back to your mother, Daniel. Tell her to gather the family and come here. The Fitzgeralds and Morgans, too. We'll make our stand together." As Daniel rode off to deliver the message, Yates turned to Madeline. Get the children inside. Pack only what you can't bear to leave behind. If Hollister wants war, we'll give him one, but not at the cost of innocent lives. You're planning a rescue, Madeline realized, reading his intent in the set of his jaw. Yes. But first, we need to ensure your safety and that of the children. Inside the house, they moved with the efficiency of people accustomed to crisis. Madeline gathered essential supplies and keepsakes while Yates checked and loaded every weapon in the house. I'm coming with you, Madeline declared as she emerged from the children's room, having explained to them in gentle terms that they would be staying with Mrs. Johnson for a while. Madeline Yates began to protest. Robert and Rebecca are my friends too, she interrupted. And this is my fight as much as yours. The children will be safe with Sarah and the others. I won't be left behind while you risk your life. Yates studied her determined face and recognized the futility of argument. All right, he conceded, but you follow my lead, no unnecessary risks. By nightfall, the other families had arrived at the Vance homestead. The women and children were settled in the main house, while the men gathered in the barn to plan their approach. Hollister's ranch is well defended, Yates explained, sketching a rough map in the dirt floor. But there's a back approach through the creek bed that might get us close undetected. How many men can we field? Asked James Fitzgerald, a grizzled former cavalry officer. 8, including myself, Yates counted, plus Mrs. Vance, who insists on joining us. 9 against 15, Morgan calculated grimly. Not favorable odds. We have surprise on our side, Yates pointed out, and righteousness. Never underestimate the power of fighting for your home against men who fight only for money. They spent the next hour refining their plan, assigning positions and responsibilities. By the time they were ready to depart, midnight was approaching, providing the cover of darkness for their mission. Before they left, Madeline went to say goodbye to her children. They were still awake, too excited by the unusual gathering to sleep. You be good for Mrs. Johnson, she told them, embracing each tightly. I'll be back as soon as I can. Are you going to fight the bad men? Caleb asked, his small face serious in the lamplight. We're going to help our friends, Madeline answered carefully. Hannah, perceptive as always, studied her mother with worried eyes. You'll bring Mr. Westbrook back too, won't you? Safe. I'll do my very best, Madeline promised, touched by her daughter's concern for the man who had become so important to them all. Outside, Yates was waiting with their horses. The rest of the rescue party had already departed, taking different routes to avoid detection. The children. He asked as she mounted. Worried but brave, she replied. Hannah made me promise to bring you back safely. A fleeting smile crossed his face. Smart girl, I made the same promise about you. They rode in silence through the night, the only sounds the soft thud of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a night bird. The landscape was transformed by moonlight, familiar features rendered strange and ghostly in the silver illumination. As they neared Hollister's property, they dismounted, tethering their horses in a protected grove before proceeding on foot. The creek bed Yates had mentioned provided natural cover, allowing them to approach within 100 yards of the main house without detection. The other members of their party were already in position, spread out around the perimeter according to the plan. Signals were exchanged, soft hoots that mimicked a hunting owl, confirming everyone was ready. Remember, Yates whispered to Madeline as they crouched in the shadows, our priority is freeing Robert and Rebecca. Avoid confrontation if possible. She nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The weight of the revolver in her hand was unfamiliar but necessary. Yates gave the signal, and their plan was set in motion. On the far side of the property, James Fitzgerald and 2 others created a diversion, setting fire to a hay storage barn. As expected, most of Hollister's men rushed to combat the blaze, leaving the main house lightly guarded. Yates and Madeline, along with Daniel Johnson and young Morgan, used the distraction to slip closer to the building. Through a ground floor window, they could see Robert and Rebecca, bound to chairs in what appeared to be Hollister's study. 2 armed men stood guard inside while a third patrolled the veranda. I'll take the man outside, Yates murmured. Daniel, you and Morgan be ready to rush the door when I give the signal. Madeline, stay behind me. Before she could protest, he was moving, a shadow among shadows. With practiced stealth, he approached the guard from behind, rendering him unconscious with a swift blow before the man could raise an alarm. The signal, 3 short whistles, sent Daniel and Morgan charging toward the front door, while Yates and Madeline circled to a side entrance. The coordinated attack caught the remaining guards by surprise. A brief, intense struggle ensued, but within minutes, all 3 of Hollister's men were subdued. "Took you long enough," Rebecca remarked dryly as Madeline untied her bonds. "Had to wait for the right moment," Yates replied, freeing Robert. "Can you both ride?" "Try and stop us," Robert answered, rubbing his chafed wrists. "Though I wouldn't mind having a word with Hollister before we leave." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Victor Hollister himself appeared in the doorway, a shotgun cradled in his arms. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with cold eyes set in a face used to command. "I wondered when you'd make your move, Westbrook," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I've heard of your reputation. Didn't think you'd throw in with these small-time ranchers against a man of my standing. You're standing." Yates replied, positioning himself subtly between Hollister and the others. "All I see is a bully who can't get what he wants honestly, so he resorts to threats and kidnapping." Hollister's expression hardened. "Business is business. This territory is going to develop with or without the cooperation of stubborn fools like Johnson and the Vance woman. I'm merely accelerating the inevitable. By stealing land that others have worked for years," Madeline challenged, stepping forward despite Yates's attempt to keep her behind him. "By threatening children and burning homes, progress requires sacrifice," Hollister replied dismissively, "and those who stand in its way often find themselves casualties." "Not this time," Yates stated firmly. "Your men are occupied with the fire, your hostages are free." "Your plan has failed, Hollister. Accept it and move on." A dangerous smile spread across Hollister's face. "You think I didn't anticipate rescue attempts, that I didn't have contingencies in place." From outside came the sound of returning men, their voices raised in alarm as they discovered their unconscious comrade on the veranda. "It seems we're at an impasse," Hollister observed, satisfaction evident in his tone. "You're trapped, outnumbered, but I'm a reasonable man. Surrender now, agree to sell your properties at my offered price, and everyone walks away." "Not happening," Robert growled. "Then I'm afraid this will end badly for you all." Hollister raised his shotgun, starting with the troublemaker who initiated this foolish resistance. His aim centered on Madeline, finger tightening on the trigger. Several things happened at once. Yates lunged forward, shoving Madeline aside. The shotgun blast tore through the space where she had stood, splintering the wall behind. Daniel and Morgan tackled Hollister from behind, sending him crashing to the floor, and outside, unexpected gunfire erupted as new players entered the conflict. "Sheriff's Department." A familiar voice bellowed. "Everyone stand down." Through the window, they could see Sheriff Miller and a dozen deputies surrounding Hollister's men, who were wisely lowering their weapons. In the confusion, Hollister attempted to regain his feet, reaching for a pistol concealed in his coat. Yates was faster, his own weapon pressed against the land baron's forehead before his fingers could close around the gun. "Don't," Yates advised coldly. "You've lost enough today without adding your life to the tally." Sheriff Miller entered the room, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Quite a situation you've got here, Hollister. Kidnapping, attempted murder. That's a far cry from the legitimate business dispute you described to me." "These people trespassed on my property," Hollister protested. "I was defending myself. After you abducted Johnson and the Reeves woman." The sheriff countered skeptically. "I've been gathering testimony from your former employees, Hollister, men with troubled consciences who were willing to talk once I offered immunity for lesser charges." He gestured to his deputies. "Take him into custody. We'll let Judge Wilson sort this out, though I suspect even his friendship with you won't overcome the evidence we've collected." As Hollister was led away, cursing and threatening legal retribution, the tension in the room gradually subsided. Sheriff Miller turned to Yates and Madeline. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Vance," he said, removing his hat respectfully. "I should have taken your complaints more seriously from the beginning. It wasn't until one of Hollister's men came to me with information about the planned abductions that I realized how far he was willing to go." "Better late than never, Sheriff," Madeline replied, too relieved to hold a grudge. "What happens now? Hollister will stand trial. With the evidence we have, he's looking at a long stay in Huntsville State Penitentiary." The sheriff glanced at Yates. "As for you, Westbrook, I'm willing to overlook your past entanglements, considering your role in bringing Hollister to justice. Texas could use more men with your sense of right and wrong." "Appreciated, Sheriff," Yates responded, though his attention was primarily on Madeline, checking her for injuries from the close call with Hollister's shotgun. "I'm fine," she assured him, reading the concern in his eyes. "Thanks to you." The ride back to the Vance homestead was considerably lighter in spirit than the journey out had been. The night's events, while harrowing, had resulted in a decisive victory for the Allied ranchers. Hollister's threat was neutralized, his operation exposed, his future confined to a prison cell rather than the empire he had envisioned. Dawn was breaking as they approached the ranch, the eastern sky blushing pink with the promise of a new day. The children and those who had remained behind rushed out to meet them, faces alight with relief and joy at their safe return. Hannah and Caleb threw themselves into their mother's arms, a tangle of small limbs and fervent embraces. Madeline held them close, savoring their warmth and the knowledge that their future was secure over their heads. Her eyes met Yates's. He stood a few paces away, watching the reunion with an expression of such tender longing that it made her heart swell. In that moment, surrounded by the family she had fought to protect and the man who had risked everything to help her, Madeline knew with absolute certainty what she wanted. Later, after the excitement had subsided and their allies had returned to their own homes, Madeline found Yates on the porch, gazing out at the land that had been defended at such cost. "The children are finally asleep," she said, joining him at the railing. "Too much excitement, I think." He smiled, the expression transforming his rugged features. "They're resilient, like their mother." "They've asked if you're staying," Madeline said after a moment's pause. Now that the danger is past, Yates turned to face her, his expression serious. "What did you tell them?" "I said that was a question I needed to ask you myself." She took a deep breath, summoning courage. "Are you, Yates, staying?" He studied her face in the gentle morning light. "That depends on what's being offered, I suppose." "A home," she said simply. "A purpose, a family who needs you." "Who wants you?" "And you, Madeline?" he asked softly. "What do you want?" She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. "I want the man who rode out of nowhere to save my children, the man who stood beside me when others would have counseled surrender. The man who has brought laughter and security back into our lives." "I'm still a drifter at heart," he warned, though his eyes betrayed the hope her words had kindled. "A man with a past that sometimes catches up to him." "Then perhaps it's time to stop drifting," she suggested, reaching up to touch his face. "To find a place worth staying for." "I believe I already have," he murmured, covering her hand with his own. The kiss that followed was gentle at first, tentative with the newness of discovered feeling, then deepening as years of loneliness and longing found expression in this connection. When they finally parted, both were breathless, smiling with the wonder of what had begun. "Does this mean you're going to be our new papa?" Hannah's voice asked from the doorway. They turned to find both children watching them with wide, hopeful eyes. Yates knelt down to their level. "Would you want that?" he asked seriously. "For me to stay and be part of your family?" Caleb nodded enthusiastically. "You can teach me to ride and shoot and everything, and read stories," Hannah added practically. "Papa always read to us before bed." "I think I can manage that," Yates agreed, a smile spreading across his face. He glanced up at Madeline. "If your mother agrees, that is." "I believe we've established that she does," Madeline replied, her heart fuller than she had thought possible after the loss she had endured. 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Madeline Vance became Madeline Westbrook in a simple ceremony attended by their neighbors and friends. The children stood proudly beside them, Hannah holding a bouquet of wildflowers, Caleb bearing the rings with solemn responsibility. The Vance Westbrook Ranch prospered in the years that followed. The alliance formed during their struggle against Hollister evolved into a cooperative that strengthened all their operations, allowing them to negotiate favorable terms with the railroad when it eventually extended a line through their region. Yates found in ranching the purpose he had sought through years of wandering. His experience and tactical mind proved valuable not only in managing their own property, but in helping neighboring farms develop sustainable practices. Madeline discovered that her heart, once broken by loss, had not only healed but expanded, making room for a love deeper and more mature than she had known in her youth. She watched with pride as Hannah grew into a confident young woman with her father's head for business, and Caleb developed into a thoughtful young man who combined his mother's compassion with Yates's steady strength. They added to their family 2 twin boys born a year after their wedding, followed by a daughter 3 years later. The house that had once felt empty after Thomas's death now rang with laughter and activity, a home in the truest sense of the word. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, Yates surprised Madeline with a small wrapped package. "What's this?" she asked, turning the gift in her hands. "Open it," he encouraged, an unusual nervousness in his manner. Inside was a silver locket, simple but elegant. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of their family on one side. On the other was inscribed, "For the light that called me home." "I had it made in Austin," Yates explained, helping her fasten it around her neck, "to remind you of how it all began." "As if I could ever forget," she murmured, touching the locket that rested against her heart. "The night a mysterious cowboy saved my children from outlaws, and a brave woman saved him from a life without purpose," Yates completed, drawing her into his embrace. Outside, the Texas sun set on their land, on the home they had defended and the life they had built together. In the distance, their children's voices called to each other in a game of tag, their laughter carried on the evening breeze. Madeline leaned into her husband's strength, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought him to her door that fateful night. What had begun in danger and uncertainty had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring, a love that had given both of them the home they truly needed.